Warning, this podcast contains scenes of explicit nonsense and lore.
Previously on the Resident Evil podcast.
Can I just say, Daisy was not as scared of that sequence as Nick was.
I mean, out of all the millions of scenes you could have picked, you've possibly picked the two most horrific ones in the entire franchise.
I don't appreciate your ruse, your cunning attempt to trick me.
I don't know, I would say go with Batman because I've had quite a lot of Merlot.
So George Trevor doesn't moan about it again, does that include his point?
Yeah, George Trevor controversially asking to get a point for a question we fucking got right.
The Resident Evil podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 101 and a brand new season of the Resident Evil podcast. More over the top than a C-virus mutation whilst looking to rein in those bioterrorists at the same time. I'm Nick, better known as Neptune. Let's see who's joining us today. He's put Code Veronica into his room 101. It's the Batman.
Hello there.
What's in his room 101? It's those damn remakes. It stars Tyrant.
Hello.
And there goes Paul W.S. Anderson and his map fades into his 101. It's Rombie.
Better get my ass out of here.
Coming up in this podcast, we'll be taking one final look at Resident Evil Outbreak File 2 as we celebrate its 20 years. We are looking at the finale, the pièce de résistance, the end of the road. We'll also be catching up on all the latest news and ending with a new season of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. What could possibly go wrong? But let's start with the news. Resident Evil Director's Cut, yes, that all-time classic, has now received an update. If you are in the PAL regions, you can now switch it to NTSC mode, which is very exciting if you want to run a little bit faster round the mansion.
That's doing it a disservice there, Nick.
It's
It's running the game as it was originally intended. Would be a better way of saying it.
Released on the PlayStation Network, so you can finally play it on your nice new console, PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. I streamed it a couple of it last year when it first came out, but yes, that was in PAL mode. Now we can play it in NTSC mode. Sean, did you have a little test of it to see what it was like?
Yeah, I have. It's perfect. I begrudged, having it and not being able to play it in the correct speed. I got it way back on the PS3, probably, God, how many years would that be? 15 years ago now. And obviously, over here, the purchases carried over when they introduced the PS1 range on the PS4 and 5. It's not a version of the game I would revisit because of being hampered with the PAL speed. It's around 17.5% or something like that, faster and in the NTSC territories, which makes all the difference on a game like Resident Evil, on most games really, but the Resident Evil games really benefit from it. And this is notable because outside of Deadly Silence, this is the very first time that we've been able to have any version of the original game in full speed over here officially, which is really cool because when 2 and 3 came out on the PlayStation Network for the PS3, they were notably the NTSC versions, whereas the director's cut has always been in the PAL jail, as we call it.
We knew no difference, Sean. We knew no difference.
I did, because I used to import them back into there.
Just as a minor point, this does not mean we suddenly get the amazing trombone alternative music, which I was somewhat excited about just to have it, because PAL regions have never had that version. I know.
Yeah, we've never received the DualShock version over here.
No.
And we're better off for it.
If you've had the director's cut downloaded and you live over here in the UK or PAL territories, if you've never had the opportunity to, give it a go, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much faster the game runs.
Next bit of news comes from Remake 4 news and game sales. So Remake 4 is doing tremendously well, let's just say. I mean, not a surprise, really, was it? Remake 4 reviewed extremely well. We all really enjoyed it for what it was, but it's actually sold 9 million copies in the past 12 months, making it the fastest ever selling Resident Evil game. I'm not sure what that says about long-term future of the series, But what it does say is that Resident Evil 4 in both guises continues to be an incredibly popular game, both with Resident Evil fans, but also the wider gaming public. If Capcom had any fears about alienating the wider gaming community with a remake of a beloved classic, I think the sales figures speak for themselves, and they've been able to strike gold again, something that we often speak about on the podcast as to whether they can do it again, and Capcom continue to do so. So that's pretty good going, isn't it? What does that tell Capcom, do you think?
That's the question, isn't it? It's almost worst case scenario for me. I'm obviously overjoyed that the series continues to do well, and it, is only ever going to add to its longevity. And I actually, for all my issues with remakes over the years, couldn't be happier that it's a game of such staggeringly high quality as the 4 remake. Because it's easy to be cynical about the fact that, it's another remake. Was it really necessary or what? Because the original still holds up very highly for me. But I have to give them some credit. The game is phenomenal. As an overall package, how well did the DLC was priced, the VR mode, the post-game support's been really strong. The game was strong enough initially as it was anyway. So it's well-deserved, and it's not surprising to see it still selling well, but it does just mean, you can just imagine that boardroom meeting going, let's just roll out the next one.
I will say, though, I've noticed in the community, there is more of a shift to people wanting Resident Evil 9 rather than another remake. I mean, it's inevitable more remakes are coming, but there's definitely more appetite for Resident Evil 9 than there was a couple of years ago, where everyone just wanted a remake of everything. You can definitely sense the tide is shifting a little bit.
Inherently, it's that thing where, it's kind of tough if you look at the other top sales. I mean, even the remake of Resident Evil 3 has topped over 9 million. Obviously, Resident Evil 2 is closer to 15 at this point.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. But then, even Village and 7 have both sold. Village is close to 11, 7's over 14. So I think whatever the next game is, remake or not, it's going to do well. It's until you get a game that's a real bad bump in the road. I mean, I would have thought Remake 3 would have been that, but even that hasn't really been a sales slag. Over 9 million is not something to sneeze at by itself. So, and the fact that 4 is just passing that in such a small amount of time, it's if it keeps selling at this track, it'll be on its way to being the top one. It'll overtake 2 eventually.
It's safe to say the RE engine chapter of Resident Evil's history has been a very strong one for them.
I was going to say, the RE engine itself is just a wonderful engine in terms of accessibility. I think the way it all sets up, Remake 3 may be the weakest, but it's still very pick up and play. It's still fun. There's still lots of, enjoyment you can get from particular sections if you, fancy just doing downtown. You might, want to get that bit, that kind of thing. And Remake 4 for me is the definitive version of RE4. And obviously this year we're going to be looking back at the original. I'm really intrigued to see how it holds up in terms of accessibility and going back to those controls, if you like, because I think the way the RE engine works in tandem with the kind of base of a Resident Evil game works. Yeah, so you see by the numbers, even Village, which was we liked it. It's got issues in terms of its fantasy, and it's selling well. It's still fun. It's still got its moments. It's real good horror moments that will be remembered for a long time. So if you look at future possible remakes, I know there's rumours floating around at the moment. I mean, I don't give them much weight, but I mean, if you look at something like Resident Evil 5, which I think singularly still the biggest selling RE game.
There's some caveats to it.
Yeah, this has always been the issue because it's that combining of multiple units, whereas the modern 7 and Remake 2 and all this, they basically all released more or less at once, and so all the platforms get counted together, whereas back in the day re-releases and later ports
that's right,
with separate SKUs. So, and then Capcom kind of changed how they started to group those eventually, and it's kind of,
but regardless, RE5 was a big seller for Capcom.
There was, but at this rate, Remake 2 and Remake 4, if it keeps tracking this way, will both overtake it. Like that's just, and I mean, the next quarter financial result for that third quarter that will actually fully complete. The total details up to the end of December will be out at the end of this month. So we'll have a being January, so that we have a clearer enough view of where they are at again, because we're going off what information was released.
Yeah.
Not in their proper full financial quarter return, just that information that went up on as part of the website, which isn't even the completed quarter, obviously. So
since the last podcast, the Switch 2's been announced, which although the specs haven't been released, most people are of the view that it's kind of PS4 Pro-ish, maybe a little bit less than a PS4 Pro. I can absolutely see Capcom jumping on this, going, here you go, here's some native ports for that
Well,
system.
that's the same thing with these ESRB ratings for versions of Resident Evil 5 and 6 that look like to be native Xbox and PlayStation ones. I mean, and again, do these count as separate SKUs, or are they not anymore because they basically started to consider all download versions as DL under their titles, so they just probably get added to the main line 5 and 6, and those are also pushing 10 million units for just those base versions. So
I can't see him fitting it all on one cart, but there's a tiny possibility that the definitive version of Remake 4 and Village could be on the Switch too. If it's on one cart, as opposed to DLC, but I doubt it. Some breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sad to report it is the end. It is the end. Capcom have called time on their very popular multiplayer game, Reverse. Remember that? Reverse, that free bundled game. And who better to talk about it in memoriam than our resident online Resident Evil player? Some say he's become symbiotically attached to other players called Death. All we know is called Stars Tyrant. Stars, talk about Reverse. What are your experiences? Are you sad? Are you surprised? And I know you've been playing a few final hurrahs on the servers.
Well, it's time to pour one out, isn't it, on what has been, frankly, the greatest chapter that we have been blessed to see in our time in the fandom. And the likes of you and I, Nick, go way back, and I can't think of a very better Resident Evil experience than Resident Evil Outbreak that we're going to talk about in this episode. Reverse, then. I mean, what a weird concept it was in the beginning. The grand celebration of 25 years of Resident Evil involves the heroes running around, almost bastardized versions of recognizable Resident Evil locations, killing each other. Because that's how I like to celebrate, like Chris and Jill together, and Chris and Claire, and Leon and Ada. Let's just have them running around a deathmatch arena, shooting each other with arrows and shotguns and things like that. It was arguably a concept that was dead on arrival, and I think it's only because that I do have a sort of passing interest in like deathmatch arena shooters, because I used to play them, way back. I used to, always be playing Unreal Tournament and Quake Arena and things like that. So Reverse was a kind of nice throwback to that era. I would never go as far as to say it was really any good, but it kind of scratched an itch, and the fact that it looked and occasionally sounded like Resident Evil was just a bonus on the top. I'm not surprised. The support for the game has been, frankly, shocking. There's a lot of strange omissions that, when you consider, like, everything is already pre-built under the RE engine anyway. Where was Carlos? Where was Nikolai? Where was Wesker? All these assets and things that were created for the series. Why were they not just bundled in, just for the sake of it, have it be a grand hurrah? And it never ended up being that. It just ended up being this just very flat release. If anyone can remember the actual timeline of events with Reverse, it was announced as like the grand celebration of 25 years of Resident Evil, and it came out as an open beta in like 2021, I want to say, and it existed for a few weeks, and it was whatever you wanted to take from it. I took quite a bit from it because, like the aforementioned, love of these kind of games, but I was never convinced it was anything other than just a bit rubbish, And to try and dress it up as anything other than that is being a bit disingenuous. But the open beta kind of went away, and was it even an open beta? It might have even been a closed beta. But anyway, it went away. It was supposed to launch with Village, and it never did, because Capcom pulled the plug on Reverse before Village came out. And then it just kind of went away, and no one really wanted to talk about it. Capcom didn't seem to be anything but ashamed about it. It just kind of disappeared into this quiet little corner of everyone's memory. And then it was only when the Shadow of Rose DLC was announced and the subsequent Gold Edition with a third-person mode for the main campaign that Reverse kind of surfaced again, and it's going to be bundled with, it's going to be releasing the same time as the Gold Edition. And it came out, and it was exactly the same as what the beta was. Yes. Like that extra, what we're talking, 18 months of dev clearly didn't happen. And the only thing they changed, although the original face still exists, was that they changed face on the title screen to RE Village Chris instead of not Redfield from RE7. So everything about it was just tinged with this kind of weirdness. So in answer to the original question, like, am I sad? A little bit. I'll miss the occasional times I've had with it, and it's ironically, like, everyone is playing it now. The last couple of days I've been able to get on and get it within a match in like 30 seconds. Well, this hasn't happened for, a long time. So it's fun to have a final hurrah on it, but it never became anything close to what it could have been. And I think more people would have sacrificed Reverse if it meant like a longer support roadmap for Resistance, which kind of got abandoned as well.
The writing was on the wall. Everyone knew, don't get invested. I mean, we've got till June 29th to play it, ladies and gents.
If you get a chance, give it, and you did have some fun with it back in the day, and I say back in the day, it was only like literally less than a couple of years ago, go on it for a little last hurrah. You might run into one of us, and as toward the end of the end of life, I might even stream a couple of sessions just for old time's sake, But, I'm not surprised. It was arguably a concept that was doomed from inception to completion. You sort of look back and think, well, what on earth were they thinking with this one? And it just adds to an increasingly long list of Resident Evil multiplayer experiences that crucially aren't what people ask for, but ultimately not Outbreak, which seems to be like, and it's fitting that this has fallen on like the last episode of our Outbreak coverage. But in many ways, Outbreak is all anybody's ever asked for from a multiplayer Resident Evil experience. And they just continue to just not give us it and try other avenues that are failing constantly.
They've tried most of them, so, who knows? They might go, right, let's do proper survival horror multiplayer. Let's see if it works. Even if it's like a real small beta, they could perhaps remake just the Outbreak scenario just to see what it's like. You never know.
Who would have thought that at the time of recording this podcast, and this is somewhat unbelievable, but Umbrella Corps has outlasted Reverse.
Yes.
And let that be the final note.
And Operation Raccoon City. Or you can still go play if you want. Load up your PS3s. Get that multiplayer goodness.
But, I will say that as much as we've trashed, Operation Raccoon City and whatnot, like when we did our playthrough a couple of years ago, or whatever it was, you can see hints of, how that game has achieved, like, some sort of cult following now. Like, there's aspects of what make a great Resident Evil experience in Orc. It's just the game is so jank, I think it really is held back by, some questionable mechanics and things like that. But the actual template that game is based around, like a 4-player co-op campaign going through a story, it's not a million miles away removed from Outbreak. It's just a different genre of playing. So maybe that's what they need to consider again.
Well, rest in peace, Reverse. We hardly knew ye.
Indeed.
Movie news, and thank God we've got Rombie here. The George Romero's Resident Evil documentary is out now, at least in North America. It's not quite out in some areas of the world, but there are ways of watching it. I wouldn't necessarily support them, but it can be watched officially in North America.
Excuse me, Nick. Sorry. You could use a VPN.
You could use a VPN, absolutely, yeah. But it's available to rent and buy on various streaming platforms. I think Brand's done a good job in getting it on quite a lot of places to be able to watch it.
I wish I could give him credit, but I think it's just the distributors he's got through. But I think the plans are for them to expand it out even more. And obviously, the European release is not too far away, hopefully.
It's gone down well. I've seen lots and lots of positive reviews. We will be doing a proper look at it in the future, almost certainly once we've all had the opportunity to really sit down with it.
It's a shame that we haven't been able to get anybody involved with it just to cover it for the news today. Really into it. How do you feel it's gone down, mate?
I keep saying this to other people. I've lost all sense of objectivity to the documentary and to its release. And I'm just glad it's out there, and I'm glad people are enjoying it. It's been like 5 years in the making, and the distributors want to do a physical release in the States. And I was talking to Nick about this before we recorded, but I think the European one is just going to be a bare bones. By the sounds of it, the distributors already got a plan to have a physical release at launch, which means it's just going to be the movie and probably a trailer or something as the extras. Whereas I think eventually the distributors want to do a full featured US release with extras. And so the work never finishes in theory. 5 years, movies out, and now it's like, oh, do you guys want to put together some stuff for that? Okay, sure. So I wish I could answer that with an objective mind, but I've got none. It's good.
So if it collectors out there, the US Blu-ray could be the one to
I'm hoping
keep an eye out.
I'm hoping it would be regionless, but again, I'm not in charge of that. We're not, and people keep asking me and Brand things, and we're like, well, it's sold to them. It's out of our hands. So, it's just one of those one of those things.
It's part of the movie industry generally that people don't, I mean, and I hold my hands up as well, people don't really know how it is. You just assume that the people that make it have complete creative control over what they want to do, and it's just not the case.
No, I mean, even big studios will distribute to other big studios in other regions to get their movie out. So, like, you could be a movie that's under one company in the US, and then it's an entirely different distribution, like another major one, but it could, or a minor one in a different country, and they control exactly how they market it and distribute it and so forth. Yeah, that's it, exactly.
We certainly look forward then to having that worldwide release and being able to review that for a future podcast. Final bit of movie news, relatively breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, at the time of recording. The Hollywood Reporter is reporting that Resident Evil reboot is in the works, something which I think a lot of people had come to expect, such as the use of the rights owned by Constantin. But Zach Cregger has been signed on, or at least rumoured to have been signed on, and Hollywood Reporter is pretty accurate with these things. They're not, it's not like some random person leaking stuff. This is usually has a bit of credence behind it. But yeah, Zach Cregger has been signed on to direct, maybe write the Resident Evil reboot. He has, what did he do? Barbarian.
He was a comedian and part of a comedic trio before he did Barbarian, which obviously did very, very well for him. And there's another movie he's worked on that hasn't been released yet, which is Weapons, which I think is through New Line. It's another horror movie with Josh Brolin, which is getting good buzz. And so I think this is what's added to this news about a bidding war over him being co-writer and director of this new reboot. I never would have expected a bidding war over a Resident Evil movie, but here you go.
No, and for people unaware, I mean, there's been loads of rumours flying about exactly what movie it's going to be. I mean, nothing's been nailed on, but wasn't there an Umbrella Chronicles name floating around, a Zero adaptation?
Yeah, there was, and whether or not it's this one, no one knows. Him being attached to a new version has been rumoured around for a little while, so obviously a few people have known that this was coming for a little bit. I'd say a few months at least. The co-writer's the guy who did John Wick Chapter 4 and Army of the Dead, so Army of the Dead, he definitely knows some zombies. Yep. Shay Hatton. But yeah, I think it's just one of those cases where we won't find out until something gets announced or something leaks, so officially. So the assumption is, with the statement about it going back to its origins, that it would be something early on.
Do a George Trevor movie. George and Lisa Trevor movie. That would be the one for me.
I mean, in theory, that would be an interesting way to take it back to some horror roots and connect that kind of concept going back. But then, like, people will argue they want zombies and that sort of era of it in. So it'd be interesting. The thing is, we're in an era where things are being essentially more faithful. It seems to be starting to bulk the trend, and I think people will look at the fact that the film franchise hasn't been particularly that faithful up until this point, barring Welcome to Raccoon City, and even then, not directly in line. So it'd be very interesting to see what that actually means, because you've seen those other things becoming more directly inspired by existing narratives, or directly, like The Last of Us TV series, directly framing an existing title. So it'll be a bit of a change, I think. Sony's obviously, if people know, Constantine has always partnered with Sony for their distribution, and that's usually been through Sony's subsidiary Screen Gems, which was a brand they brought back to kind of release sci-fi and horror movies in particular. And it looks like in this case Sony has come on board as like a production partner more directly than they have in the past, but they've switched from Screen Gems to PlayStation Productions, which is the media arm they've put up for all their game-related film and television efforts in recent years. So this again makes it much more interesting, because they've been more of a focus on trying to do stuff that's more true to their source materials, if that makes sense.
We have been here before, though, gents, with Welcome to Raccoon City, a film which I didn't mind. It probably just bit off a little bit more than it could chew.
Remember, James Wan was originally attached to the previous Resident Evil film as well, which got everyone excited until he walked away.
This is interesting because Zach Cregger, I don't know whether you guys have seen Barbarian, but very, very good modern horror. It's mostly set around a singular location. So I suppose if there is anyone who could potentially be lined up to do something similar to, that kind of... I mean, the movie Barbarian is nothing like Resident Evil at all, but, in terms of it just being fixed to a singular location, in his ability to make that single location quite creepy and unnerving, even when it looks very normal, is good. And we're a little bit different from the situation we were in with Johannes Roberts, because at least Zach Cregger's got one critically acclaimed movie behind him, Whereas at best, like Roberts' back catalogue was just, cult, wasn't it? At best, B-movie cult. I don't think he's ever had any particularly well-reviewed movie when he went into Welcome to Raccoon City. And Paul Anderson's background was very mixed.
About Anderson was very mixed and very much the same. I don't think you'd say he'd have anything highly critically.
No.
Like, if they've been cult films or flopped on release and been re-established, like Event Horizon. Or
I suppose that if you not to squeeze out a bit of optimism,
Careful.
The talent's good this time. He's tried and tested. He did a very, very, very good modern horror a couple of years ago. So, part of me wishes he wouldn't be attached to something like this, because I don't really want to see someone like him locked into what is very much now a studio film with overheads like Constantine and things like that. But we'll see.
I still maintain an RE film struggles with its runtime. I think there's so much that you want to get into a film to get that feeling, to get that exploratory element in. For me, it lends itself to an 8-parter, or just doing little bit by bit.
This is the thing I've said before, which is that I felt like the Netflix series and the Welcome to Raccoon City thing were backwards. Like, Welcome to Raccoon City should have been the 8-parter series, and that Netflix thing probably could have been another like Resident Evil action-y sci-fi movie that was 2 hours long. It didn't need to be 8 parts.
Yeah.
And it probably would have had a better conclusion for it. The only other interesting thing of this, as far as I'm concerned, is that if studios are going in for a bidding war, they're going to try and outprice each other, which means this will definitely, without question, be the biggest budgeted Resident Evil project we've had. Not even a question, because that will go with it. And the thing about like the Anderson films is that he always kept a relatively modest budget. And I mean that on scale, like they went up, but they were always relatively modest compared to their returns.
Yeah.
And the Welcome to Raccoon City movie had a budget less than Anderson had for his first ever film of the franchise. So do put that in perspective too, which people do forget. So this will be very interesting on that perspective. Like, if you have a bigger budget, you probably have more room to do some things that would be quite out there, like on the sense of scope and scale potentially, that we haven't seen. And so if they did a RE1 movie, it could be like, actually being faithful and having like mutants and plants and snakes and all that sort of stuff, for example, just using that as an example. And Zero, again, the sorts of things that you could get away with potentially. I don't know. Be interested to see.
What you're also potentially coming off the back of now is a very, very well received and faithful Last of Us adaptation, and a Sonic franchise, which for some reason has just gone into the stratosphere, which is doing very, very fan-pleasing things about it, putting in like the big things that they know is going to make fans exceptionally happy. Like Sonic 3 even uses like, one of the most famous music tracks from Sonic Adventure during like its big moment. And you can imagine what a feeling that is for Sonic fans who, just wanted something faithful. And it's almost like studios are starting to wake up now, which is like, if we make it like the games,
it might be popular.
This is what people want.
Well, Mario Brothers as well. That was exceptionally popular.
No, we've had a run of these things. I mean, like, it's like Super Mario and Sonic to a degree. They're still wholly original in their execution, but they make sure that the stuff that's in there isn't just, padded fan service. It's actual meaningful fan service. And that's a very big difference, I think, that you have to put in compared to like the old days where they would put in the shoehorned reference or the Easter egg kind of thing and call it a day. And that's very different. But they're still different than I think than The Last of Us, which obviously was very much almost a verbatim in some scenes, telling of the same narrative. And I'm one of those people who for years has been saying we need to do more of this sort of making something more faithful. But now that we're here, I'm like, I don't know what that means for Resident Evil. I don't know what that looks like anymore. Previously I would have, and coming from a background of just done this documentary with the George Romero script, that in 1998, there was only a couple of games, much more easy to have a key on what that means. Now, what does that mean for Resident Evil? If you took a narrative from Resident Evil 4, that would be a different movie than the narrative of Resident Evil 1, right? So I'm curious more on that level too. Like, if going back to an Origins definitely means obviously much more slower creeping horror, I'm excited.
We shall see, as we always do. Quick thank you to some new patrons just to finish off the news. So a big thank you to Resident Zeno, Nikita Mason, and Anthony McCardle for joining us on Patreon. You can find out more on our website. Just head to the community tab, and there'll be a link there to our Patreon, all the benefits Well, that does finish the news, so we now turn over to the end of the road, celebrating 20 years of Resident Evil Outbreak File 2.
Let me go!
No! It's way too dangerous to go back now.
I left something very important back there. Trust me when I say it's gonna be a big help to us later. I promise I'll be back before you know it.
Fine, but I'm not waiting long.
Fair enough. Thank you.
So long as you realize, if it's my ass or yours, you could bet my ass will be the first out the door, baby.
You all right, buddy?
Yeah, thank you.
Wait a second! She's human! Carter.
You're here for the sample, too, right, Linda?
Yeah, now let's take that and get the hell out of here. You might want to get moving there too, stranger. Of course, you can always come with us. We got a helicopter waiting. What's going on?
Some kind of alert? Something's wrong. We should check it out.
Not now, of all times.
So welcome, one and all. We have replayed End of the Road, the finale of Resident Evil Outbreak File 2. How well did we do? Well, we'll find out. But as in true style for the Happy Birthday podcast, we've been beginning to end, and we're going to kind of dissect our adventures through actually what is a really enjoyable, and I would almost say it's like a greatest hits of Resident Evil in the End of the Road chapter. So we're going to see how well we do and what problems we encountered along the way. But as always with these things, let's start with a timeline check-in with Batman. This one's pretty easy, isn't it?
Yes, probably the easiest of the lot. I mean, it's it starts sometime after midnight on October 1st, 3 or 4 hours before the bomb hits, so it's pretty clear-cut.
Pretty clear-cut, and at this point in time we've got what I've described in the past as the main headquarters of Umbrella. There's absolutely no canonical source for that, but you can see from the opening cutscene of End of the Road, this is very much in public. You've got a funky-shaped building. It looks like it's clearly Umbrella themed. I can only assume it's its kind of commercial headquarters. That's where you're starting off at, which is interesting because you are in the labs. As I said, it's a bit like a greatest hits of Resident Evil, but it's actually a greatest hits of Resident Evil in reverse. If anyone's ever stopped to think about it, most of the classic RE games, you kind of start out in more of a somber moment, whether it be in the streets, and you kind of work your way sewers, labs, that kind of thing. But this game, you kind of start in the labs. Then you kind of go to the sewer underwater works. Then you get back to the street, and that's the end. Nice little bit of symbolism there.
A neat observation, that.
It was. I was quite proud of myself when I was thinking of that. But that's about as good as I get, I'm afraid, with End of the Road, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah, it's a bit like that. Who did everyone play as usual? I'm no doubt be unsurprised to know I played as Yoko, but that was a terrible decision. Who did I have? I had Kevin and David joining me, because this is quasi-David scenario-ish.
I had Kevin again, and I brought David and Mark with me.
Brought the boys. Rombie?
I had Yoko and...
Did you play as Yoko?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Because I was like, I can't remember the scenario at all, and I need extra space. But I went with Yoko and had Cindy and George with me as well.
Cindy and George. Tyrant?
Would you believe I played as Alyssa?
Did you?
And I had Kevin and George with me.
We are creatures of habit. There is no denying this. I am right in saying it's kind of a David scenario, isn't it? I don't know why. Is it because he gets the intro beginning?
Yeah, he's assigned to this scenario, and he will perish in it if you don't have him on your team.
But he doesn't have any particular story significance.
No.
But yeah, I suppose he is the default character for this one.
I always thought so, just because of the opening. But you're right. I think Yoko she doesn't get anything special, but she is mentioned in a file, Yoko, which I thought was quite cool.
She does. She gets a big thing in this one, Nick.
Did she?
If you,
assuming I've done this, which is very unlikely.
This is later into the scenario, but when you have to escort Linda through the facility, if you ad-lib while you're walking with her, you will get Yoko's basically full backstory.
Oh!
How she was a test subject for the T-virus.
You can also find a secret file if you reprogram a second MO disk and copy both codes onto it. There's a computer terminal in the special research room, which gives you the secret file, the list of Greg Muller's T-virus subjects, and Yoko's name's on that list.
It's a bit frustrating when you're trying to work out like how to split the 4 on the last day, because Yoko is obviously present at the university because she has exclusive scenes there with Greg.
Yes.
But she kind of needs to be present for Linda so you can then get the backstory through the ad-libbing and the conversation. So a bit of a catch-22 this one for Yoko's placement. I mean, she's still, for me, in my money, bound to the university if you're splitting, the teams into 2 4s, but it's just as important that she's in end of the road.
Well, we start after the sequence showing Linda and Carter, who's a funny, interesting chap, isn't he? As they are in the what I'm calling the commercial headquarters. They're all getting a bit tetchy about wanting to escape the city. They're leaving it a little bit late, but there's a helicopter waiting for them. And there's a zombie kind of that they deal with. And they're looking to take a sample with them. And Carter seems to be a little bit more excitable, should we say, than Linda. But you start in the waiting room in your little area, and there was 4 first aid sprays for me. I don't know, because I played on easy mode, and I grabbed them, and they kind of lived in my backpack. And I was hoping I wouldn't have to use them, but alas, we did. Not a lot of zombies actually in this game. I'm not sure if that was, again, because I was on easy mode, but most of the lab where you start exploring really is hunters. And I think that notches up the difficulty quite significantly because they do respawn.
Apart from the zombie in the intro, I don't think there's any zombies at all in the corporate building. It's exclusively hunters and the Tyrant.
That's fine. That's what I thought. I didn't encounter any till you get down into the waterworks and some kind of come up, classic RE style in the water. The thing is, I didn't find the hunters that difficult. You just got to be careful because they're not as dangerous as the 121s. These are the same as the 125Rs, but you can get stun locked if you're not too careful. And I suppose that the first thing you're trying to do is find the key. It's the classic. You're trying to find the experimentation key. Carter and Linda go off, and then you've got a little bit of an area to explore, looking in the lab. Some doors are locked. There's a door with blood stains on it. Take note of that. And I don't want to linger on the general point that I could spend so much longer in this area. I found the lab quite interesting, but you just don't have time to really, really explore. It's been a fault that we've kind of discussed a lot with this. You just got to crack on and, know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing, it can take a little bit while to get your bearings. I was a little bit disorientated. It's been a long time since I've played this, and I was trying to remember exactly where everything is. It took me about 5 minutes to work out how to bring up the map. I thought, where's the map? How did everyone begin? Anything interesting from leaving the waiting room and heading into the main area?
Well, you say about that you sort of lament not being able to spend more time. I ended up spending a lot of time because I completely had a memory block on where the level 1 keycard was. And I think my virus gauge was already at 20% by the time I'd actually worked out where it was past the laser fence, which I just completely couldn't do it. It's funny, I've done these scenarios literally dozens of times, many times online, and if you just have a little bit of time between playing them, your memory can just fail you in certain ways, and it's so frustrating. So I was completely held up for a good 15-20 minutes at the beginning, avoiding hunters, just looking around for this effing keycard.
Rob, how did you start?
It was a very painful, slow start because
really?
I do not remember this level at all. It's painful. My problem with it is also that it all looks very samey at the start. So and then you obviously end up eventually shortcutting doors once you get that key card, so that kind of makes it easier in the sense, but also harder because then you forget which ways you've gone already because you're now going through the same areas from a different way. So very slow progress.
Well, the first thing to get hold of that, I think it's called the experimentation chamber key.
Examination.
Come back.
Examination. Sorry,
and you come back to the start area again, and then go through the door. Yeah.
Yes. What about you, Batman? How did you start?
Okay. again, I hadn't played this for a while, and I find Outbreak quite intimidating because, we've been playing Resident Evil for many years now, and a majority of the games are very familiar. When you start playing them again, it quickly comes back to you. But the Outbreak games never do for me. So I booted it up tonight, not knowing anything really about what to do or where to go. But it starts off, nice and slow. The hunters aren't really much of a threat. It only took 2 pistol shots from Kevin to put one down. But I suppose there's a story reason for that, with the hunter muse being, smaller hunters and used for the battle test with the Tyrant, so that's fine. The environments, like Rob said, it's a bit disorientating because they all look the same. The corridors are identical, but I like the look of them. I remember when we were going to get the infamous Resident Evil 4 Umbrella takedown version, I always imagined this is maybe what Umbrella's main European headquarters looked like. A similar kind of environment like this. But yeah, no issues really. It was just a question of finding the examination key, opening up a few more areas, and once you get the level 1 key card off the body, you can pretty much open up the whole facility.
Yes, and what was the code on the... Because that's a bit of a random one.
I think the code for me was 489, and it was the same code for every door.
Yeah, 234. Which was handy, because I just assumed it would be in kind of like numerical order.
264 for me. Which difficulties did you guys play on? Because I didn't have much time this week, so I cowardly went to easy.
Same, I was on easy.
I was on easy, prayed for that it wasn't very easy, but there is not.
I played on normal, and I confess I had a couple of run-throughs, because by the time I managed to work out how to get out of the corporate building, my virus gauge was on 56%. So I had to restart it, and I managed to find my way out in about 10 minutes. Once you get the level 1 key card, it opens up, it becomes much easier. And then when Carter releases the Tyrant, it's pretty much a question of just following Linda towards the exit. And the only thing you really have to remember is to smash the hole in the wall before you trigger the cutscene where the Tyrant starts coming after you instead.
Yes.
And that was one thing I did actually remember.
Well done.
But the only sort of big optional detour was to get the second MO disc to get the secret Yoko file. Other than that, I can't really think of any big optional exploration detours.
Well, we'll come to that. I want to spend some time talking about... Sean's already spoken about the lasers, so you go into a couple of the rooms once you've got the key, and you see these cool lasers, and you can go to different rooms, and you can see, press the button, and you've only got a very short period of time to be able to get beyond it. That took 2 attempts. I found if you have any distractions, you won't make it. You've got to be quite pronto to run around and do the loop. Plan that route quickly and hope that you don't... If you get... I got stun locked the first time by a hunter. I was able to dispatch it, and then I ran back through thinking, here we go, and it was back up again. And I was like, so I don't know what the actual time limit is, but it seemed very strict. Any interruptions upon your way, you might not make it, but I don't know what it is actually. Yeah, you should get the level 1 card, open up, and you then see Carter upstairs, and he's faffing away on his computer. I put in my notes here, there's no actual kind of cutscene, so unless you go up and talk to him, you don't actually know what you've got to do. I know there's the MO disc on the trolley, but you've actually got to physically engage with him. He doesn't speak. He does speak, but not voice acting. And he says he needs the MO discs.
I suppose a couple are like that, though, aren't they?
They are. It's obvious, but they could have made a point and go, it's just something I noted. And then, pick up the MO disc, and then you've got to go and, because it's encrypted, you need to, is it decrypt or encrypt? I can't remember if it was decrypt or encrypt, but you needed to go to particular points to put the MO disc in, so it will be ready, so the Tyrant could be programmed. Any idea? I fact there's lots of newspapers around. What are they for?
The actual newspapers are just hints relating to other scenarios, like Money Scoop, which is it's about someone running for Raccoon City mayor, I think. So the newspapers aren't necessarily tied to the scenario. They just sort of add a bit of background to the overall Raccoon City lore, which is quite nice.
Well, the kind of general criticism of the Outbreak, it can be quite hard to know what are the key items at times. We've only usually 4 spaces. I mean, obviously, I play with Yoko with 8.
Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily know that newspaper was not needed, and it's just a little bit on the side.
That's fair, Nick, to be honest.
It is. You don't want to be handheld, but at the same time, I don't understand why that's not a file.
Yeah, I think we've discussed this before, and doesn't it just add to your scenario points if you physically pick it up? Yeah.
Is that what it? Yeah.
I think the obscurity of the scenarios that you're sort of saying about there is down to the fact that the game is designed to be replayed many, many times over. So it's one of those really sort of strange experiences that you're almost sort of meant to fail the first few attempts until you learn the structure and the the order of it, and then gradually through repeated rehearsals, it all starts to come together. But if you're just playing it from like a single, lore run, just to have a quick go every now and then I think its flaws are quite apparent. When you come off playing it how it should be played as such, and just rotating it as part of a series playthrough, then I think it doesn't quite hold up as well.
With the ammo disc in hand, you then head to the stairs well, and this is where I first, and sadly only save. There's a save point there, and I recommend saving at that point. And then you go down to the main frame, where you can insert the ammo disc, and then it modifies it, and then you can kind of head back. I don't think there's too much to do at that point. There's a couple of hunters you need to try and avoid. And then the other ammo disc you can use on the other console, and that will then trigger Carter and the release of the Tyrant, which is cool because it's almost the same as the kind of Tyrant from Resident Evil 2, but there's parallels, of course. If you kind of think that Decisions is happening at the same time, two Tyrants are basically being released at the same time in Raccoon by two completely separate people working for the same company. I just found it interesting. And this is a T103, but if you pick up the file, it tells you that this is the T0400 TP version. So it's a slightly modified version that can be programmable by an MO disk, which I think is a very appropriate item that a Tyrant can be programmed by. And I headcanon that TP stands for Talos Prototype.
I've never heard that before, Nick.
Have you
okay.
not? I must have pushed that back in the forum days. It just makes so much sense.
It kind of doesn't, because the Talos prototype's already there.
Yeah, I know it has been. It's been captured, but I meant in terms of Talos prototype, because the whole point of Talos is that it's almost completely programmable by AI, and that doesn't really happen until 2003 in Umbrella's End. So the idea that you can put a computer program directly into I don't know. It was me, but it's me being silly. But I like that was my headcanon, and I'm sticking with that.
I love that. No, I respect that. I respect the hustle.
But what's great about this, and I think this is one of the only times that you ever see a Tyrant being basically in complicit mode or in a cryotube and then being specifically programmed to do something. You would assume that the Nemesis, for example, would have gone through a similar process but was programmed off screen. Same with the T103 Mr. X's. And they had a dedicated program on board. But most of the other Tyrants, like the TO-001 and 002, I don't know if they were programmed at all other than kill. But I'm guessing Wesker may have. I'm not sure. Is it ever implied that Wesker, did he actually program it to kill him, or did he just let him because he knew he was just gonna?
No, I don't think he programmed it to kill him. The Tyrant and the Mansion had been immobile for so long that it had sort of lost its programming, so it was just attacking indiscriminately when it was released.
Yeah, but this one was specifically programmed, and what's great is that it's on your side, which is very unusual. But it's a cool thing. It just kind of bursts through and just carries on, and then just takes out the hunters for you. Don't get too close to him.
Okay. I've reprogrammed it to take out those amphibian monstrosities instead. Who his masters are. But that's not all. I packed in a special little present. So if worst comes to worst, tall, dark, and ugly is ground zombie meat. After all, weapons are only so good in as much as you use them. What a masterpiece.
Yeah, let's just get out of here, okay?
It's a cool scene when he first jumps down into the hunter pen as well.
Yes.
Because up until that point, there hadn't been many examples of BOWs fighting each other. I think the only other instance was the hunter decapitating the zombie in Resident Evil 3. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, we always get these kind of details in background files, don't we? But it was nice to actually see it.
Mm.
You know, that the hunters were brought to this facility specifically to fight the Tyrant, just to see how much damage it could withstand. And, you know, to actually see that firsthand was very cool.
It did a good job. I mean, it begs the question, why in such a open and clearly commercial part of Raccoon City, but, you know, this is Umbrella we're talking about. I can only assume they just didn't give a monkeys about it. What I liked about this scene as well was there's a nice little interaction between Carter and Linda, isn't it? Linda's kind of a bit like, oh, you know, is this a good idea? And Carter's like, oh yeah, this is perfection. You know, he's kind of got the kind of mad gene going on inside him. But yes, you know, he then goes on and then you can explore parts of the area where you couldn't before and get the crack in the wall. Yes, you're right, John, weren't you back? Because that leads into the nursery. I think that's what it was.
Leads into the special research area, I think it's called.
You've got the hunters in the cryo tubes.
That's the nursery.
That's the nursery, isn't it? Yeah.
But that is where you get, I think it sounds like you missed this, John. You can get a crowbar in there. That just means you can use it against that panel and drop it immediately.
Yes. That was my plan, but with limited items and hunters running around, I ended up just blasting the wall with the shotgun.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. I'm going to hold my hand up and say I blasted with the shotgun. And again, it's a nice clue because it gives you a proper angle on it, and you go, that doesn't look particularly good. And I was like, bam, bam, bam. And I wasted so much ammo.
Yeah.
Because
get the crowbar from the nursery next time, Nick.
Oh, no, it wasn't that. It didn't take too long with the shotgun. It was only like 2 or 3. I was quite happy with that. But I didn't realise that you had to crawl. I thought you could walk. So I was blasting the second one, going, come on! And I wasted all my shotgun ammo. Oh, no. And then I went on to my handgun. I was like, what's it doing? And then I thought, oh, I crawl through. Any problems, Rob? Did you see the crack in the wall? Doctor Who style?
Yeah, I did the crowbar. I didn't waste.
You found like you. No, I will make it difficult. Yeah, the crowbar is a bit later on, isn't it? You can kind of backtrack.
It's in the nursery.
The nursery? I thought the nursery is where the grenade launcher was.
Yeah, with the baby hunters.
Yeah.
Yeah, the crowbar's in there.
Yeah, that's not where you smash the hole in the wall. It's before then.
Oh, okay, sorry. Bearings. You can pick up the model grenade launcher, and then you do the classic RE replacing technique, and to get the actual grenade launcher.
Yeah, it's funny because I think throughout, like, you guys have talked across the last 10 scenarios, you guys have talked quite a bit about, like, grabbing shotguns and things like that. I don't know whether it's the same with you, John, but, like, because Alyssa's got the pot shot, I tend to just stick with the pistol the whole time. I very rarely take any harder firepower around with me. Because the pot shot's such a good tool to have.
Yeah, but I like using Kevin's default pistol because it's a lot stronger, but ammo for that seems to be very scarce. And I always intend to pick up another pistol and just keep getting loads of ammo for it, but every time I see a shotgun or a heavier weapon, I'm like, no, I need to swap it around. But there seemed to be quite a lot of shotgun ammo in this scenario. I pretty much, once my initial 7 rounds were done with Kevin, I think I switched to the shotgun and kept it for the rest of the scenario.
A big issue I came across was that my handgun was broken twice in this by the hunters. Yeah, so my default was smashed, and then I stole Kevin's, and then his was smashed, and I was like, this is ridiculous. And I'm guessing David can probably fix it, or one of them can fix it, but I couldn't. So I was losing a couple of that. I'm such a fan of the grenade launcher that I had to take that and keep it in the inventory. At this point, I hadn't really been hit a few times, but I struggle with item management because I know I need the health because Yoko's pretty weak. And I know I've got 8, but I end up playing with 4 because 4 of them will be first aid sprays. And I really want handgun ammo, shotgun ammo. And you can't do that in this game. You end up sometimes purposely getting hit. I don't, but just so you can justify using a first aid spray for uncaution. Anyway, once you've got that, you are near the end of the commercial, and you can follow Linda, and you head your way to the east exit, which I have to say is probably one of the funniest scenes in Resident Evil.
Linda getting a tiger uppercut?
Before that, I just found it. I honestly laughed, and you're kind of walking there, and everything seems happy, and this Tyrant just kind of pokes his head round the corner, and goes, "Hello," and kills Carter. I just thought it was hilarious because you knew the Tyrant was going to turn. There's no way he was going to be your friend at any point. I just found the way he kind of peered around. It was like a meme, looking around as he kind of like leaned around the corner, going, "Hello, I'm here." And yeah, then all hell breaks loose. I've forgotten about that little scene.
It's kind of weird because there's no real reason given for why he suddenly changes.
Yeah, I was going to ask that if there's a reason that's not obviously explained. It would have made sense as if it was like someone like remote reprogramming or realizing it had been activated and triggering something that overrides it or something like that would make sense. But it just switches on a dime.
No battle damage. They could have easily put something with the hunter or something. Perhaps destroying some inhibitor or something like that. No, he just kind of turns and then you're kind of in the room. A good tip here, ladies and gentlemen. You don't get many Neptune tips with these type of things. Run. Leave the room because it's very narrow, very small. Leave the room and then come back in again. And then you can pick up the level 2 key and you're done.
You see, I took the former advice to heart, Nick, as I fled the room immediately, knowing that I needed to go back to the sort of main computer area underneath the, the crawl passage, the crawl space. Got all the way to the level 2 door and realised I never picked the fucking key card up. I had to go all the way back.
Gutted.
So, yeah, the level key cards really messed me up on this run.
Sounds like it.
2 for 2 for completely forgetting about them.
That's a shame. Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, is what I'm going to say. My run had been relatively okay, apart from messing up the laser corridor for a bit and a couple of hits with the hunter.
Wasting all your
ammo. I had relatively good health. It all goes wrong after this, and it's all entirely the Tyrant's fault. I just didn't know how to deal with this Tyrant and what to do with this Tyrant, and everything goes pretty much wrong. So you get the level 2 key card, and that gives you access to the waterworks. Again, it's classic Resident Evil. You are in, you're basically being stalked by the Tyrant, and it's so small, the area, and I know he's not particularly fast. He can damage you big time. He's got some proper, punches on him. He's got the classic kind of double club punch, which can knock you out. And because Outbreak has this stupid cruel system, I found he obviously had a thing for Yoko because he wasn't really interested in the other 2 people. He just liked me. And I really didn't know what to do because I quickly found the bomb switch, which is on the floor, and the temptation to switch it. But I knew I wanted to save it because just to jump ahead, if you've got the bomb switch on your inventory and the next creature absorbs Tyrant at the end, that can end the boss battle in one go with the bomb switch. Activate the bomb switch, blows up the Tyrant, blows up Nyx, all good. And I thought, that is what I'm going to do, because the last time I played this many, many years ago, I was done by the Nyx fight. And I thought, not this time. No, we're going to take the bomb switch, we're going to save it and do it. And I was just struggling in the waterworks, running around, and I kept getting stun locked. So I thought, no, I'm gonna take him out. And between us, so I was in the room where I think there's another. Is it the maintenance? It's the one where you come back and you put the valve handle in that room. I don't know what it's called. Where you change the valve handle from a 6 to a 4 or something.
The drainage room.
The drainage room. So that is where I decided, no, I'm not having any of this. I'm going to take him out. And all 3 of us were in that room at that point. And I used up all my ammo and all my health. And eventually we did a couple of exits as well. And I got him on the bridge. And I felt great jubilation in killing him. But it took its toll big time. I was able to reclaim some health. But I think I was, by this point, up to 40%. It was a bad idea, and in hindsight, I shouldn't have done it. I should have just ran. The problem I found was I was just getting stun locked every 5 minutes, and he just seemed to take a particular liking to me. And because I don't know where to go 100%, I found myself going, no, not this way, back again. And you just end up running into him, because it's all very narrow corridors. I think if I'd known the scenario a bit better, I probably could have done it. And it goes back to your point, Sean, about, the game probably expects you to die, redo it again, and kind of learn the path through multiple times.
Mm.
I just found it frustrating. I mean, David was killed at this point, and it wouldn't even let me access his stuff. I don't know why. I couldn't get anything off him.
Did you take David as a partner?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. He's destined to die in the waterworks if you don't, and his corpse is not available. Although his corpse is present, you can't take any items off it because it's just classed as like an NPC death. You know how like George dies in Decisions?
Yeah.
It's like that for David here, but he's not got any items on him because he's not. If you didn't choose him as part of your team, then he doesn't have any items because he wasn't a present character as such. But you're saying you chose him.
Yeah, I don't think he had anything particularly useful, but I'll never know.
Just out of interest then, Nick, because you chose him as a character as part of your team, did you find like combined weapons lying around and things like that? Because there was a couple of cattle prods, like his battery and pipe weapon that he can make.
I didn't see any
lying around.
I think I have in previous runs.
Yeah,
I didn't have in this one. Anyway, sorry, that was my little, not rant, but that was my mini adventure in this part of the waterworks. It's mainly down to the fact that I didn't really know where I was going and what rooms I needed to go in, and the temptation to hit the bomb was very high. But I took him out, and so I felt relatively happy with myself. But in hindsight, it was a poor choice. Batman, what about you? When you exited with Linda, how did you find this area? What did you do?
Well, riding down the elevator into the waterworks, I thought we might get a bit of a reprieve from the Tyrant. But no, as soon as you run round the narrow walkway, he drops down from the ceiling, and I was like, fuck, you can't get past him.
No.
So I had to retreat back to the elevator and let him come at me and then run round him. And then I made my way through, and luckily for me, he got preoccupied with David and Mark, who'd followed me down. So I was able to get away, but I could not find the bloody detonator anywhere. Did not know where it was, and because this was my first run through, I'd spent so much time in the corporate building, my virus gauge was like at 60%, and there hadn't been a save point for a while. So I couldn't really hang around and search much, so I ended up leaving the detonator because I could not find it. I made my way through to the maintenance room where you push the box onto the conveniently circled weak floor.
Oh, yeah.
And then you drop down into like the storage area with all the umbrella boxes. There's a couple of spiders down there. And then you end up in like a construction area. And from memory, it's like a maze, that place. But I think just via pure luck, I managed to get through it relatively quickly. And I got back into the sewers and found Linda on the floor. And interestingly, because the Tyrant was still active at this point, I hadn't taken him out. When the level flooded, I got washed away with Linda. So that was me out of the sewers completely. I didn't have to do anything with the valve handle or wade back through the water and look for an alternative way out. I just got washed away with Linda.
I'll come to what my experience for that little bit. I'm intrigued to know where you ended up.
Thanks. I must have passed out or something. Wait, Carter. He didn't make it. My intuition was screaming at me to stop him from using that thing as some kind of a toy. Even the damn capsule got broken as well.
Curious, what was in it?
Umbrella has been spreading a virus throughout the city. That little capsule contained what could have been the only possible cure to the virus. I ran a check on the capsule and basically know how to recreate a new version, but none of that means a damn thing unless I can get my pretty little head out of here. Huh?
Rombie, what did you do after Carter's death? Linda's big punch.
And just the uppercut. Relatively straightforward. I just kind of managed to make my way through the Tyrant's, the grey chemical bottles, managed to slow it down enough, and it didn't seem to be that interested in attacking me as much. I don't know why that was. So by comparison to your Yoko, who was getting absolutely annihilated, I don't know if it's because I threw that and it was like, right, I'm not going after that anymore because that was not nice in my face. So yeah, I still have very much a struggle of just getting very easily lost though. So my time taking through this was not particularly great, and thus the virus scourge was going up. It wasn't horrible experience, but I still reminded myself why I'm not a big fan of these games, and it's that time pressure element of making my way through.
Star Tyrant, what about you? I assume the bomb doesn't move. John just kind of missed it because it was, for me, it was on the bridge.
Yeah, that's where it is all the time.
It's
very
okay,
easy to miss though, because it
is
looks like a little black dot on your screen. It's not got any great detail as you're running past it. Yeah, I mean, again, my memory failed me on this, and I ended up running around a couple of times. I managed to get the box pushed through the weak floor, and I went down and smashed a couple of the crates and climbed up as you do, and I had to go and rescue an endangered George at this point, who just had a big trouble getting past the spider, and I had to physically lift him from the ground to be able to heal him, because he was going to be a goner otherwise, and I wasn't prepared to lose an NPC at this point, you know. And then I grabbed the bomb switch, and I had a plan for it, so I didn't use it on the Tyrant, and so I got washed away with Linda as well. And I know you're going to ask the question, but let's just say you always end up somewhere very familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Same here. Same here.
Was it a mistake to kill him then? 'Cause I thought I was doing quite well. For my personal experience, it was just because it took too much out of me. But
the bomb switch has way more use if you hold on to it.
Well, I did. But I didn't take him out with the bomb switch. I just took him out with normal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, with shotgun and stuff.
I don't know. Honestly, it's been that long since I've done the valve handle exit from the water area. I can't even remember where you end up.
Okay, well, I'll explain. So, yes, you jump into the water, web spinner there, took him out. I wasn't messing around with that. And then you end up, as John said, in that kind of maintenance area. And here is 100% my next big mistake, is that I missed the break room. I think it's the break save room. There's a break room with a save room in it. And by this time, I'd done quite a lot prior to my last save. And yes, you then meet with Linda in that area, and you still get all the same sequence of the water coming in, but I just wasn't washed away at all, and I just stayed there in the middle. You pick up the valve handle, which is near to, I think, where Linda was, and you then explored the waterways. What was quite amusing was that Kevin hadn't jumped down, so he was kind of following me from the levels up high. So he was running around, kind of following me, and I was kind of wading through the water. This is where I deal with a few zombies. But there's quite a lot of ammo around you can find, which is a good restocking of it. And then you use the valve handle to bring down the ladder. That itself isn't 100% clear as to where it is, but eventually spot it. You then go up the ladder, and then that ladder takes you back to where I killed the Tyrant and where the bomb switch was. And then you can go back into the room, change it from a 6-sided to a 4-sided, and then go back to that ladder, but go the other side, and there's a 4. It's totally pointless why you didn't do it. I don't know why. It just seems unnecessary. And then you bring down another ladder, and then you are up in Main Street.
That does sound arduous, Nick.
It was a little bit, because there's a couple of classic zombies that just emerge from the water. I had a couple of chunks taken out of me, which is just annoying, because at this point you're quite used to only facing hunters, spiders, tyrants, and you've got a bloody zombie in the way. Oh, go away! But because Yoko isn't the strongest, a couple of bites from a zombie can needlessly put you down to caution. You're like, oh, for God's sake!
When you say you emerged on Main Street, is that right near Rodrigo's helicopter then?
No, I was I think it was Main Street, by the Apple Inn.
Oh, okay. If you get washed away with Linda, you end up in the sewer that you jump into in the Outbreak scenario when the tanker explodes.
Ah, okay,
so you
that
just
works.
emerge out the sewer the same way you would as if you were playing through Outbreak. It's the exact same camera angles and everything. It's literally just recycled environment.
It's a big chunk of how the scenario was planned, because it was made late, as I recall. It was like, we need to use assets that they didn't use for other things and reuse things that they had already had.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I remember reading the development notes for this. It sounds like, Nick, really you did yourself a disservice by killing the Tyrant, only in that it made you have to do the thing you would have done had you used the remote and blown it up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to keep it, but still had to do all the heavy lifting part, which is annoying.
Well, I'll be honest, I thought if I took the Tyrant out, in the sewers and whatnot, then there's a little chance he might not come back.
Yeah.
I thought,
that was wishful thinking.
It was. Have I cheated the game a little bit here? Because I know the ending can be a little bit gnarly, but... So yeah, Main Street, kind of Main Street area, and then you walk past the Apple Inn. Then you've got the cutscene, you see the UBCS with their sniping.
Arnold shoots Linda in the leg.
She does. Is it Arnold? Thank you. Yeah. She makes it into... is that the office?
No, she makes it into the Apple Inn lobby, so you can go in there and choose to bring her out with you. There's also a typewriter in there to save your game.
Oh, don't say that. Is there?
It's on the counter, Nick.
Did you not follow her in?
No, I didn't have time. Tyrant. It was all...
Not in this bit.
I'm sure.
No, the Tyrant doesn't chase you around this bit. This is your reprieve.
Yeah, this is before the Tyrant mutates.
Oh, is it? No, where did I go? Oh, God, hold on. I didn't know. I didn't go into the Apple Inn at all. No, I totally missed it. I went...
So if you bypass the Apple...
The point of the scenario is to get Linda out.
This is the question, Nick. So you didn't get Linda out after that? You just left her there?
I think I did. I think I just left. Yeah, I think I did. I just carried...
Wow.
Good job.
Nick, you're cold, man. You're cold. Just bled out in the apple inn, ladies and gentlemen.
If not bled out, left there to be blown up into smithereens.
You have to get Linda out because she can recreate the AT-1521 compound, so you've just essentially let millions of people die.
It could be why Rodriguez says, I'm not leaving, where's Linda? Because I made it to the helicopter and I was like, I'm ready, let's go.
Fucking hell, Nick.
That would be it.
That is a belter from you again.
So you bypassed the apple inn, you went straight through the construction yard.
Yes.
That's a very selfish way of getting through this scenario, Nick. Well done.
This'll be the 99th rodent I kill. Wait a sec. I think that may be a live one. Well, fuck it.
What are you doing? Get the hell out there and find them. How long do you plan to just sit here and do nothing? Can you get it through your thick skull? If the package gets out, it will be your neck on the line, not mine.
Sir, landmine placement complete.
Okay. That seals off any ground exit.
What? Did you forget I'm the one that gives the orders here? Wait! Think of the position I'm in.
100.
But what would you rather face? Would you rather face the mutated Tyrant?
Thank you.
Or,
Yeah.
Or would you rather be getting sniped at by Arnold at the same time as getting blown up by landmines?
Well, we've been saying all the way through Outbreak File 2, haven't we, that, like, I personally feel that, like, every scenario has something in it that detracts from its overall experience and puts it more into a negative. When I compare it to File 1, across all the 10 scenarios, if there is a single most awful moment, it's the Arnold sniping section. Because to my knowledge, and I think, you know, this is corroborated online when you look, the only way to get through that without taking fire is to exploit the invincibility frames when you're carrying Linda. You've literally got to count the shots and then release her with the X button or whatever, and then grab her so the animation takes over so the bullet goes through you. It's the only way to do it without taking damage when you're trying to escort Linda. If you're on your own, you can run between the cover and not get hit, but when you're moving with Linda, you're too slow, and he will always hit you unless you exploit the iframes. Unless some of our listeners can correct me on that one, but I've never seen it done without using the animation to your favour. But it's an awful section. It's one of those sections that, like, how did this get through testing? It's so bad.
Especially in the cutscene as well, where he realises his mistake that he shot a living person, and then decides to just carry on shooting 2 living people instead. You know, it's kind of
a really good point as well, yeah.
He's just caring about his numbers, you know. 101, 102.
He also drops this first F-bomb in the
Oh, you
series,
beat me
I
to
believe.
it, John. Yeah, that's it.
Is it? Oh, that's interesting.
Fuck it.
I want to say something in positivity toward this scenario, and it's interesting that because of Rob just saying that the production notes say this was a sort of hastily put together scenario with reused assets and stuff. It's one of the only scenarios where I felt that, and it's so frustrating because of its placement within the files, that it's essentially the last scenario we got. Yeah, it's one of the most expanded in terms of lore, that you get to see, like, the USS, the UBCS, all working against each other. You've got an Umbrella representative in Tommy Nielsen. It really felt like the lore got opened on this one.
Well, I'll be more specific. What it was that, as I recall, the other scenarios of File 2 were already in the planning and were part of essentially all the bigger scenarios they were planning when File 1 got slimmed down to the number it was. Whereas this was the only one that hadn't been even started in that concept. It was one that came together during its development. That was the only one that hadn't been completed on some level for File 2. So they basically, that's how they end up cannibalizing assets from scenarios that got cut and reusing ones to try and put it together. But from a narrative standpoint, I don't know what that means. That may be why they were able to put more narrative into it, also knowing it was going to be the last one of the File 2.
It's a shame, because you're right, the lore in this is quite good, and it's a shame we've only got half the story, because we don't really know why Rodriguez was trying to steal the Knicks.
Nope.
We don't know why his team was even deployed. I mean, he obviously stays behind to get Linda because she's wanting to get the cure out, so they're obviously going to go against Umbrella. But it'd be interesting to know why he's trying to steal the Nix, and obviously we're never going to find out.
Just gone onto Evil Resource, which is one of my favourite websites for these things, because you confused me about the apple-in. I think I was right. I got the cutscene of Linda being shot, but I didn't come out there. I came out on a place called Main Street South. I'm sure the cutscene happened straight away, and I came out on Main Street South. There's a little ladder on the map, and that's where I popped out. And then Tyrant mutates. I then run from Main Street South to Main Street North, which is where the helicopter is.
That's interesting then. So you come at it from a completely different direction to us. So the Tyrant triggers a lot sooner for you than it does for us.
Yeah. It's safe to say, Nick, that is by and far the harder route through into the road. To think if you want to get Linda out, you've got to traverse.
I've got to go the whole way. And you just confused me because I remember seeing the apple-in, but then I thought did I actually come up the apple-in? I didn't. I thought I did, but it confuzzled me. Yeah, I came up the little ladder, Main Street South, then to Main Street North, and by which time the Tyrant was running 100 miles an hour. And
he's evil on this.
It's unreal. I made it into the helicopter, and I was like, well, I'm ready to go, Mush. And he was like, no, where's Linda? I'm like, oh, I don't know. That kind of thing. And I got out of the helicopter, I prepared what I could, rushed out behind, and then footbridge, over the footbridge, which was bloody hard work. And I went down the footbridge, and then I saw a door, and I'm looking at it now, which is the office building warehouse, looking at the map. But that was the end of my game, ladies and gentlemen, because I ran there, and the Tyrant just jumped in and went / 1, 2, 3, and I'm down on the floor, and my virus gauge basically went from about 65, 99 within about 20 seconds. At this point, I was like furiously pressing the bomb switch. I'm going, this is all going wrong. But I've never seen the virus gauge go up so quick. It was absolutely brutal, and that was me done.
I'm sorry to hear that, Nick.
And that was Tyrant R. So, mental note there, do not go that way again. There is no benefit in destroying the Tyrant in the commercial centre or the waterworks. Because I'm looking at this map to see what you guys are talking about. You don't fight the Tyrant for a while then, because you go past the apple-in. I can see the save room. You completely approach it from a different direction.
If you know what you're doing. And obviously, I have to reiterate, I've rehearsed this many times across many attempts. It didn't even factor in for me at all, the Tyrant.
Right. Well, that's me done, ladies and gents. So I'm going to hand over to you guys to explain what happened to you guys.
Did you not replay it, Nick?
I tried, as with a lot of these things, replay it on Friday night when the wife was out, but she decided to come home early. So that was the end of that.
Okay.
So I was like, no. So I had about 5 minutes to play a bit of Astrobot, and then I was briefly told that will do. I was like, oh, thank you.
Well, I'll go next because I don't think I'll have got as far as Sean did. But I took Linda out of the apple-in, got past Arnold, went through the construction yard where there is a USS zombie in there and a couple of landmines on the floor. But thankfully, somehow David and Mark were both still alive at this point, so they kept triggering the landmines. You then get out onto the main street and then to the office where you get another cutscene of Arnold and Tommy Nielsen, where Arnold kicks off because the sterilisation operation's been announced, or Code XX as they call it here.
Code XX? They plan to contain the incident the old-fashioned way? Blowing up the target location and everyone in it with missiles? Why didn't you say anything, you weasel?
I kept telling you to hurry!
Damn!
Oh! Where are you going? You need to find that capsule!
You do it. I'm not gonna go up in flames with the rest of the town. This job is turning out to be a lot hotter than I had expected.
Hey! Wait!
The order to put Code XX into effect has been issued. All units within the target area evacuate immediately. Repeat. The order to put Code XX into effect has been issued. All units within the target area evacuate immediately.
So it has begun. get my butt out of here.
That then triggers a 3-minute countdown for you to get to the helicopter with Linda. I do not know how you're supposed to do this on offline mode when you're on your own. It's absolutely impossible because you have to go through a warehouse and there's several zombies in there and you cannot get past them without shooting them. And then as soon as you get outside onto the street, there's landmines everywhere, and that's when the Tyrant mutation is triggered if you take this particular route. And how you are supposed to get Linda past him over the footbridge where Raccoon Mall is and back down the steps on the other side to Main Street where the helicopter is in under 3 minutes, I will never know. It must be impossible on offline mode. So I think I gave it 3 attempts, gave up, restarted my save in the Apple Inn, said to Linda, sorry, but you can stay here, and then just went through it and did it on my own. And even doing it on my own, I only just got to the helicopter with about 25 seconds left. So I just waited inside until the countdown ended and Rodriguez took off. Tommy Nielsen doesn't appear and shoot down the Knicks, so you escape with the Knicks. Raccoon City blows up and you get, I can't remember what the ending's called, but you get the sort of bleak epilogue narration where it basically implies that the T-virus will spread worldwide because Raccoon City will inevitably repeat itself. Yeah, the newspaper, yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't make it to the final Knicks fight because I just ran out of time and I just wanted to complete the scenario and I was desperate to save Linda. But I'd love to meet someone who's done this on offline mode on their own because it must be the hardest thing to do in the entire series.
The only way to do it is with the bomb switch, because then you negate the Tyrant straight away, and then all you've got to do is get Linda through it. But I mean, even online, it's not easy. And I said to you guys, there's a YouTube video back when Sonny, JC Wesker, and Kendo's Meme Shop and I did a series of videos, a series of streams, and we failed to get Linda out by what must be 10 seconds because the timing is so hard. And like I say, even online with competent players who know what they're doing, we still failed it. So it offline, yeah, you're a braver person than I was, John, to attempt that, I think.
Yeah, I knew it was going to be hard, but I didn't think it would be that hard. But from what we've been talking about, I seem to have got lucky with my run through because I seem to have skipped. I've skipped, obviously, the extended ending with the boss, and I got lucky going through the sewers because I didn't realise not knocking down the Tyrant would shorten your route through the waterworks as well. So from start to finish, it took me about half an hour to finish this scenario, which was a lot shorter than, Decisions, the final scenario for Outbreak 1.
Rombie, what way did you go?
The construction yard, same thing with the landmines. Almost killed Cindy, who was with me, but managed to save her from completely carking it.
Did you use the mission? Is it any good, the mine? Because when I encountered them, I was like,
I didn't.
I've got no time
didn't,
for this.
I didn't, but I can imagine if you would go through that helicopter scenario, it might have been helpful. But then, I don't know. I've never bothered. I just waited for the timer so I could get the other way because I knew there was no way in making it. There was just, I still had Linda with me. So, but I didn't brave it like John did at all. And, just let that counter go down and he flew off, and then of course the next gets released. So
all right. So you didn't have John's ending then?
No.
You had to fight.
Yeah.
Sean, what was the same? You had Nick's.
Yeah. So I managed to get Linda through. I got to the Apple Inn, knew what I was going to do, Nick. So I braved the merry road of sniper fire and mines. Like John said, I still had both my partners at this point, so they were happily activating all the landmines and flying all over the street, literally flying through the air at some points. It was quite comical as I'm trying to get this injured lady, desperado Kevin and suicidal George just literally flying about the street in front of us. And in the end, by the time I'd got to the construction site where the digger is, mercifully there's a first aid spray in there. At least there is on easy, so I was able to equip it, go over to them both while they were stood together and spray it on them. Because I don't know whether people are aware, but in Outbreak you can actually equip first aid sprays and use them as, like the same way you would use a weapon, and spray it on an NPC. So I got them back up to full health. And at this point, again, it comes from knowing the game well and rehearsing it well, but I cheated here. I basically used an exploit whereby I knew what I was going to do, which was get Linda out with the Nick's path. But the way up to the roof is blocked up until Rodrigo takes off. So all I did was wait in the office block by the door that leads to the stairwell. It's not open at this point because the zombie burst through when the helicopter's left. So I just literally stood and waited for 3 minutes until got the cutscene. Rodriguez goes off, gets shot down, or the Nix container gets shot down by Tommy, and then the UBCS get consumed. And then a zombie bursts through the door on the stairwell, and then I just take Linda all the way up, and then go onto the highway pass for the big fight where it all went wrong.
Oh, that's a clever little...
Yeah. So again, it just comes from rehearsing the scenario enough. If you know what you're doing, you don't need to go into the warehouse. The game sort of wants you to attempt the helicopter exit, so that's how it would force you into seeing the additional bits. But if you know you're not going to do that, if you're going to go all the way to the Nix ending, then you never need to leave that office block. You never need to go into the warehouse.
So you didn't encounter Tyrant at all? Tyrant R at all?
No, I didn't even see the cutscene where it mutates.
Oh, you jammy little thing.
It just turns up mutated to Nix and gets...
Yeah, it's just literally climbing onto the highway pass.
Yeah.
So I got Linda to the roof, and you jump the gap. And then, like I say, the Nix battle started, and I made a complete hash of it. So at this point, I'd still got the bomb switch on me, because I know the bomb switch is a big plus in this fight. Because to the people listening, maybe not aware, the Tyrant that's been stalking you throughout the entire level it turns up on the highway pass, which is where the final boss battle against this mutated blob of a creature called Nix is. And it absorbs the Tyrant. And so the Tyrant then becomes a part of Nix. You can still see it sort of writhing and struggling in it. And crucially, the bomb switch still works here. Because the mechanic of the Nix fight is you have to shoot the Tyrant to expose Nix's weak point. And Nix's weak point is basically amongst this sort of gelatinous blob is this core that exposes when you've done enough damage to the Tyrant. And then you have to shoot the core to ultimately do damage to Nix. But if you use the bomb switch on the Tyrant whilst it's part of Nix, it will expose it for the majority of the fight. I just couldn't get the bomb switch to work. I kept running, because you have to be within, like, it says on the game, I think it's within, like, 6 meters. On the description, I can't quite remember what the Twitch description is. But I was running right up to Nix, I was taking loads of damage, and in the end I just tried to... It wasn't working, so I was just trying to fight it, using the resources and the weapons that are laid about the highway pass. And there's plenty of things. A rocket launcher in one of the trucks that you can grab. And I just made a complete hash of it. The fight must have taken me nearly 15 minutes. I was just running around. I was down to like 20 handgun bullets. Both my NPCs had died. Nix got stuck in some geometry on the highway pass and would not come into an area where I could actually get to the weak point. And it was just so maddeningly frustrating with, I think, something like 15, 20 handgun bullets left and no healing items. I was on caution. I just thought, well, this is over. I ran right up to it as close as I could, literally pushing into it. And I just thought, I'm going to try the bomb switch one last time. And it worked. And it detonated the Tyrant. Nix dropped to his legs. The core opened. I fired the pistol. And for some reason, I don't know how I did it, with 91%, I think it was, virus gauge, both NPCs dead, it finally fell. And with a painstaking enough amount of time on my virus gauge, I was able to run back to Linda. She can't jump the gap, so there's a metal panel that you have to put down to create like a bridge so she can walk across it. And then you go over to the truck where the rocket launcher is, and that's how you trigger the best ending. Wow. And I wiped my sweated brow because it was arduous. That Nix fight is absolutely awful offline because it requires a full team of, calibrated players who know what they're doing. And because if people were to go back and watch that YouTube version that I talked about earlier, when we failed to get Linda, we went up the Nix fight. Like, the guys that I was with, Sonny, JC, and Kendo's Meme Shop, did enough damage to Nix that I, as Alyssa, had the rocket launcher, and as soon as the core was exposed, which was done in seconds, I fired the rocket into the Nix's core, and we killed it in less than a minute. So the fact that it went so badly for me, I put down partially, to skill, but mainly the fact that it's just a shambles offline, these kind of things. When it requires such a team element.
Sounds rebalanced.
Yeah, it's rubbish.
But you did it, though.
You did it, yeah.
That's awesome. What's the good ending? Is this with the angels?
You will always obviously get that, but then you get a little coda of Rodriguez and Linda talking about what they're going to do now, and then you get a post-credit scene with your character.
Yes.
Alyssa's ending, her post-credit scene is basically just her in her home gym. She's doing some weights, and she looks to a newspaper which implies that she's helped And if you have Yoko's best ending, she actually testifies against Umbrella in a court, which is how stock prices end up crashing.
It's Yoko that does it.
Yeah. I think Yoko's post-credit scene is like you see her in court. She holds up her hand to swear.
I think you see her with Linda as well if you do manage to get
Linda.
Linda.
With Linda.
Yeah.
And Alyssa's post-credits ending will show her like she's exposed them through the news. She's contributed to exposing Umbrella. And you get a really cool cameo at this point because you get the news reporter from Remake, in the Remake opening intro.
Yeah.
Turns up again in Alyssa's ending when she's watching TV, which is really cool.
Oh, that's nice.
Nice little neat link between Outbreak and Remake.
I just want to go back to the Nyx fight because players of Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles will recognise the area that you fight the Tyrant in. Umbrella Chronicles famously reused a lot of Outbreak assets to tell its storyline, and whilst you can quite easily ignore Jill's retelling using Outbreak assets, some of the new stuff that they added, such as Fourth Survivor, Ada's escape from the city, is very heavily influenced by Outbreak, especially, and it ends in exactly the same spot that you fight the Tyrant, and it is the same Tyrant. It's the same Tyrant R model, if you want to call it that. So anyone care to explain what's going on here? And Batman, you're probably best suited here because you'd have put it in the timeline. How have you reconciled the fact that you've got a scene where the Tyrant kind of crawls up, if I remember correctly, he climbs up, doesn't he, quite disorientated, then gets absorbed by Nyx, and yet we've got a scene with Ada there as well, battling the same Tyrant.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a bit of a mess, but the only way for it to make any kind of sense is you've got to say Ada's fought the Tyrant and incapacitated it before she catches a lift on Sir Guy's helicopter. So once she's rappelled up and landed on the roof of the UMF-013, you'd have to assume that the Tyrant gets back up, and that's when it encounters the Outbreak survivors and gets absorbed by the Nyx.
So you have a slightly odd scenario if you're following what the Tyrant does, in that he emerges from the waterworks, if you like, mutates, encounters the survivors, jumps up, as he does in Death's Door at the end. He literally jumps onto the highway. And he's not injured or anything. Tyrant leaves the survivors, jumps up onto the highway. Ada defeats him. He then must fall down, or he kind of comes back around and then falls back down. And then the survivors come back on the highway, and the Tyrant is then kind of crawling back up. And he's like, back, and that's why he's disorientated.
Yeah, it's a stretch, but at least in Outbreak File 2, before it gets absorbed by Nyx, it's clearly injured, which I am happy to headcanon as a result of the Ada battle.
You've just got to think in narrative terms it can fit, but if you're going to get hung up over things like visual continuity and things, then that's where it gets messy.
Yeah, because in theory Nyx should be there the whole time, because that highway section is where the crate gets dropped and the guys get absorbed, because their military weapon, the military stuff that's around the fight is there, because like the rocket launcher, and there's a Humvee and stuff in the background. So you've just got to kind of ignore this doesn't quite line up.
I've never actually noticed if the container is there in the Death's Door fight, if the Nyx container's there. Because it's still present in the Nyx battle. It's just an open container on the freeway, but I've never actually. I'll have to look that up.
As John says, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much different from the broken window in the RPD, or perhaps all the
worst case scenario is it just comes down to the fact that when they were making the gun games, that they had the Umbrella Chronicles, they had the assets that were from Outbreak. It literally is that, and it was easier to I mean, that game was partly outsourced to Cavia, and that was reusing assets where they could. And if they had made new original assets, they probably wouldn't have put it on there at all, and you would have fought maybe that Tyrant or another one, but it would have been a different fight. And it comes down to that really more than the narrative construction.
When we used to argue this back in the day on forums and stuff about the Tyrant potentially not being the one from Outbreak 2 in Death's Door, I just can't subscribe to the fact that in the same part of the city at exactly the same time, there is another Tyrant running around that looks exactly the same, is mutated to the same level, as in, the limiters have gone. And it just, it's just absolutely preposterous when it's just, aside from a few visual links, and okay, the Nyx absence is a notable one, I'll grant you that, but come on.
Yeah.
We've had some outlandish theories about the fact that, it's a Tyrant from earlier in the series. It's a Tyrant in Photo C in, Remake 2 that's just, managed to escape the lab, moved, several miles across the city to be in the exact same part. Come on. It's just overcomplicating something that is very simple.
Yeah, for me, the mutation was always the key, because that Tyrant is still a T-103, and yet it's mutated in a very different way. It looks very different to the Super Tyrant of, Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. They're similar, but they're not identical, between the RE2 and Outbreak 1, whereas clearly it's the same asset. So it's the Outbreak 1 and Death's Door 1 is the same. And I think, John, you'll confirm, I don't think it was the Archives. I think it was... maybe Inside of Darkside Chronicles called it the Outbreak Tyrant anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I can't remember.
I can't.
But one of the Japanese books definitely literally calls it the Outbreak Tyrant.
Yeah, and that was the final nail in the coffin for any other theories. So, a little bit messy when comparing it to Death's Door, but, it's not the worst. How did your ending finish, John, then? Because if you survived, what was your... Did you get the end scene with Kevin?
The ending I got was you land with Rodriguez at like a gas station like 15 miles out, so you can see the mushroom cloud. I think you see just Rodriguez stood there. He doesn't have a conversation with Linda because obviously she's dead, and Kevin just sort of looks out at the mushroom cloud and makes some comment. I can't actually remember what he says now, but you don't get any kind of extended epilogue with him. You just get the narration saying that people soon stop talking about what happened in Raccoon City, but history has a way of repeating itself, and you see a newspaper headline of, sort of worldwide outbreak sort of thing, mysterious organisation behind worldwide biohazard or something along those lines. It's a bittersweet ending because we didn't get Linda out, and Linda obviously says that she could probably remember from memory how to remake the vaccine compound. So if you don't get her out, it's all a bit downbeat.
That kind of finishes then our actual playthrough to celebrate 20 years of End of the Road. Do we want to have a kind of...
Excuse me, Nick. You didn't ask me how
I did not. I cursed myself. Quite right. Rombie.
I died a horrible death. In the next fight, I died a horrible.
Did you? Oh no, what happened?
I just didn't have enough ammo. I had a grenade launcher. I thought that would be a good enough thing, but again, that weak spot, as Sean has alluded to, is not great.
How much damage does Nick's do if you don't hit the core? How much damage do you actually do to Nick?
Well, I only had one other NPC with me, and they got taken up pretty quickly, and then I wasn't far behind, so very quickly if you're not really, yeah.
Oh, that's a shame. So End of the Road had a 50% hit ratio on us four.
Nick's is also quite fiendish, Nick. I'm not sure if you're aware, but he can actually absorb you as a player, and then you are permanently stuck in it until the virus gauge goes up.
Oh, that's charming.
It sucks.
Oh, no. So me and Rob, we didn't survive. You guys managed to survive, so well done.
Arrow 2, direct hit on the target, sir. Angel 1, both missiles are confirmed hits. Return to base immediately.
This is Angel 1, roger that.
Arrow 7 and 10, direct hits. Both Angel 2 and 3 have emptied their payloads.
Arrow 5 correction. In hit coordinates, west 0.5, south 0.1.
Roger.
This is Angel 6 reporting. Confirmed all fighters have emptied their payload. Mission code XX complete. Repeat, mission code XX complete.
This is Heaven's Gate. We got you loud and clear, Angel 6. Mission code XX is completed. All fighters return to base immediately.
Roger that.
Arrow 8 and 11, return to your formation.
Let's have a quick chat then about generally how we've seen our entire Outbreak experience, then covering both File 1 and File 2, 20 years on. I mean, Outbreak File 2 especially, I mean, I don't want to say it was the, using the phrase again, file nail in the coffin, but it was the last of the old school kind of pre-rendered tank controls. And at the time, we had already had, in the PAL regions at least, we'd already had Resident Evil 4 out. And this felt an old game in 2005. Comparatively to what RE4 was bringing to the table. But the benefit of 20 years means we can look back on it, and I think the whole of Outbreak File 2 has been an eye-opening experience. I think, Sean, you're spot on that there's something about every scenario that just annoys at some point, whether it be we said the mines and the sniping, and this one's not particularly useful. The Leech Man is not as wonderful as he could be. Axe Man's a pain up the bum. The gas canisters in Desperate Times, and they don't lend themselves to a lot of replayability, and I think that's one of the key themes I think we've all discussed. We all don't mind the games, and in fact, I think if you listen back to all our podcasts, we've all had a lot of enjoyment from replaying them, and because there's so much classic RE in there, there's so much of the, as George would say, those survival horror tenets. Whether it even be a little thing like replacing a grenade launcher with the model grenade launcher, that kind of thing. But it's still frustration, especially on offline mode. And whilst I will criticise the game for not being as great on offline mode, that was never its intention. So a bit like when I replayed Operation Raccoon City, playing it as it's meant to be played is an inherently more enjoyable experience. And I think the same is abundantly true for Outbreak File 2. I do wonder if it had better save points, or maybe almost like continue points, that might help. Because we've discussed how this game can be a bit of a play and learn, play a little bit, do a little bit, and then learn how to do it. I do wonder if it would make it, if it'd been a bit more accessible by just having continue points every not 5 minutes, but every major bit of the game. Got like an auto save, just so you can go, okay, right.
I was going to say, I think that fundamentally still wouldn't solve the problem. I think the whole offline game would have to be completely rebalanced. Because inherently, as much as it is about learning, it's things that were baked in core mechanics that basically, were shaped around multiple people, and they're not fixed. It's like what John was talking about with trying to get to the helicopter in 3 minutes with one person. It's just like, it's already tough enough, and it's a good challenge, I guess, when you've got a bunch of skilled players to get together, as Sean's alluded to as well. But there's no way in hell that that's going to work in a single player environment. And like the next fight as well, I'm sure it's not impossible to finish it by yourself, but it's definitely not built around that idea either. It's built around the idea of like multiple people working together. So I think while saves or a auto-saving system may have helped, it definitely still needed like an actual like offline rebalancing that was slightly different than the online, like as if they were two different difficulty modes.
And the removal of the virus gauge. I don't
potentially, or at least a modification to it to go slower than it does for single player.
Yeah. But overall, I have enjoyed myself going back to these games. I found them, perhaps the shorter scenarios, a lot more enjoyable than what I actually remembered them to be. My memory, I think, is another key facet here, has been atrocious in trying to remember exactly what you can do. And this game is unforgiving if you don't know what you're doing. There's some scenarios, like the underbelly one with the duct tape. Unless you know that that's where you put the duct tape, it's not clear. And it's fine if this was just a normal game, because you'll find it. And, getting lost, not knowing what to do, again, a component of the survival horror genre. But when you're up against it, respawning enemies and viral gauges, it is unforgiving at times. And as I agree wholeheartedly, Rob, with your assessment of the offline mode. But I think it remains a very exciting area of Resident Evil, and one that is just teeming at the seams with lore that you want to explore. And it is a shame that these games are lost and stuck to the PS2. They are ripe for a remaster with proper online integration, and I think if they were redone today with that server support, proper online chat as well, with 4 people going around, I think these games would have a huge following, possibly even outside of the Resident Evil fandom, because I think word would spread, hey, do you want a completely unique old school online survival horror experience that is nothing like you play today? Have a go at this. I think people would enjoy it. I really do. Anyway, that's my views.
It's interesting because, like you've said, that the game doesn't lend itself to a lot of replayability. But as the only member on the team who has dabbled the online mode a fair bit, they are, because each experience online is very different. When you sort of work together over, because we just use Discord. Whenever I play it online, I've even played it with Kat, our wonderful community manager. And, when you're on Discord and you're all speaking, over the chat like we are now, great fun. Such a great experience. and you're sort of all able to work together. This is exactly why we say these games are way ahead of their time, because the ad lib system that Capcom devised does not replace 4 players actually able to speak to each other and work out what you're going to do. Because the problem is when you go into a random game, which you can do, you can just you can browse the servers and you can go, I'm just going to tag along. If you're not speaking to them, you don't know what they're going to do. And in a scenario like decision, it's absolutely key. You need to know who's going to the emissions tower, who's going down to the water treatment plant. Because if you don't talk to each other, then potentially you could all do the same thing. And then, well, who's been to the emissions tower to get the V-poison? Well, I haven't. Oh, fucking hell, we're going to have to go and do that now as well. So it ends up being a mess. But if you have 4 talking players, each time it's a slightly different experience. And, if people do have the means, please do the research, check out the to get the fan server going. You'll have the best time. And I do kind of share that sentiment, Nick, that you said there, that it certainly wouldn't break any trends with the amount of players playing it, but it would be a niche that I think would scratch a lot of Resident Evil multiplayer seekers are looking for. Because when you think about it, as a multiplayer experience, Resident Evil's bit hard done to for the last few years. We've had Resistance and Reverse, both have failed, because what people want is a classic Resident Evil style experience, and that's what this can offer. So yeah, the fact that it hasn't happened, the fact that no remaster with official servers and stuff, I know it would cost them a bit of money, but would it cost them more than the entire budget of Resistance and Reverse put together? Because I know what the fans would want more. If the Resident Evil community could trade Resistance and Reverse back to Capcom and said, no, you can keep them, use that money to bring Outbreak back with some dedicated servers, I know in my heart what most of them would choose, if not all of them.
They could almost do it and do it like a test bed. Let's see how popular it is. Let's maybe for a short period of time, or just put a beta out for 4 months or something, just to with seeing how how it would work. It'll be so popular. It'll be so popular. Rombie, final words from you, my friend.
How do I say things?
You're not our biggest Outbreak fan.
Oh, I'm definitely not. Inherently, I think it's that thing that I listen to what Sean's saying, for example, about it, and I totally understand it. And I think that's why I've always been like, for those who love it, I understand why they love it. It just never really gelled with me. But inherently, I think partly as I've explained before, I was slightly bitter over the fact that I managed to get an online network adapter for the PS2 and got my connection, got all ready, and then Outbreak came out in the PAL territories without online in its first iteration, and that really kind of soured it for me. Well, it soured it for me slightly, and then playing the game offline is what really soured it for me, because I'm like, well, not only am I getting a no online, the version I'm playing inherently offline makes this game much more tedious and complicated and difficult to deal with, and that's what really soured it for me. So even when Outbreak File 2 came out and it had a relatively limited lifespan online, what I also found, inherently being halfway around the world, was that getting online on games on File 2 at the time was inherently difficult too, which only continued to sour my interest. And I ended up spending probably, up until that point, of all the titles, playing File 2 the least of any of the Resident Evil games I had up until that point. And that, by the way, includes Survivor 2. So that puts you on how much scale I played Survivor 2 more than I probably played Outbreak File 2. Inherently, at some point, I probably should go and play it online now on the fan servers and figure out how to get it running on my computer and stuff. But inherently, I'm also so far embittered with it that I struggle with the idea, and it kind of, just somewhat frustrates me, I guess, on that level. I mean, from a visual standpoint, I love it. It's got a particular look of a PS2 era game that just has enough really good, nice details. I mean, one of the things I was looking at, I spent 30 seconds staring at it, was the flame and smoke.
Oh, yeah, amazing, aren't they?
And it's got a particular look that I just really like, and it's one of those elements where, from a design standpoint and from a concept point, I do love these games from that style. But it's just the infuriation of everything else that kind of just really is the sour point for me. So, and why they've been my least loved. But I can't inherently say that they're the worst thing in the world. I've definitely played worse games. I've definitely played, Survivor 2 is not a great game. I shouldn't even say that I played it more. It was just me
running through it, but it's definitely a worse game. The mechanics in this are very well thought out in a lot of ways, even if the offline mode is, belittles some of them. And from a narrative and cutscene and voice acting, it's all a mixed bag, but it's still an interesting thing, and I'm glad Capcom went down that way to try and experiment it. And it was ahead of its time. And if they did bring it back and reimagined it with a modern take, but still used the scenarios and expanded upon it with the same cast of characters, I would definitely be there to try it out. Not even a question. And that would be a fun experience, especially being able to play it in a modern sense. Or even just an HD version with some, outsource it to a studio. One of the ones that have been doing these PS2 ports, that can re-upgrade the graphics to a higher level, but still keeping the stylistic form, and just make tweaks to the back end and make it usable from a front end perspective as well, as far as a user compliments thing. I would be more keen to try it now that way. I think that's it. That also puts me off from playing on my PC. It's just, I know it's not impossible to get it running, but it is some hoops to jump through. It's not just chuck it in a console and start playing it. So yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Sorry, guys.
No, it's fine. No. Batman, what about you?
Well, I think you've pretty much covered everything I wanted to say. If you applied the fixes you've mentioned, and if it played as fluidly as the original PlayStation trilogy, I think I would play it endlessly. I'm probably more fond of it now than I was when it first came out, because at the time I just wanted the core story to progress. But as we get older and you've got less time to play these games, it's nice to be able to jump in and out and experience a little bite-sized, self-contained chunk of Resident Evil. Modern games these days, you've got to play them for 20 hours to get through the whole story, whereas one of the original attractions to Resident Evil for me was it was literally like watching or playing through a horror film. It would only take you, several hours to get through it from start to finish. The 10 scenarios, they all offer you a completely different experience. If you want something lore heavy, you go through Decisions. If you just want a zombie survival siege story, you do Desperate Times. If you want more horror, you maybe do The Hive, And it's not playing the games regularly that makes it a fresh experience every time you do it. I mean, if you've ever been sat at work and you think, do you know what, I fancy playing Resident Evil 2 tonight, and you're looking forward to it all day, and then you get home and you fire it up, and within 10 minutes you start to get a bit bored because you think, I've done this so many times, I know exactly where I'm going, I know where everything is, what I need to do, and it kind of puts you off persevering with it. Whereas with Outbreak, we've played these 10 scenarios in the last year, but if I was to fire up, say, Hellfire now, I wouldn't have a clue where to go or what. And it's kind of unique in that because it feels like a fresh experience every time you play it. I don't think we'll ever see a remaster of it. It would be great if it did happen, but I think, unfortunately, it's consigned to the history books now. But I've very much enjoyed this retrospective. I've pretty much enjoyed every single scenario we've done.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That does finally finish our look back on both Outbreak and Outbreak File 2, celebrating 20 years since their release. And that does bring our main podcast discussion to an end as well. But, hold on to your hats. It's a brand new season, ladies and gentlemen, of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
The ultimate test of Resident Evil knowledge returns. 100 podcasts later.
Jesus Christ. What fucking question is that?
I'm getting a big fat 0 this week.
Yeah, I'm not going to get any of these.
I'm not going to say anything because I know that you'll just change the answer or something. Like, you don't even know what the answers are.
Can I just ask, have you had all of these questions independently verified?
And still things don't quite go to plan.
You only have to probably get it right.
Welcome to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. Batman. Stars Tyrant. George Trevor. Rombie the Cregger. Mr. Spencer. Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
Welcome, one and all. Yes, who doesn't need more Biohazard-themed questions? You thought you'd had enough in Biohazard Stars 4, but no, you're back for more, like a rabid dog. Right. We've got something different. Whether this works, we'll find out later, but clear your desktops, open up Notepad. We've got 5 new questions. Here we go. Question number 1 is from Outbreak File 2. What logo is on the examination room key? What logo? On that first key, we spoke about it earlier. But what logo's on it? Question number 2. What shape are the main areas of the Umbrella Commercial Headquarters? What shape is the building? We've got some options. It's either A, a hexagon, B, a heptagon, C, an octagon, D, a nonagon, or E, a decagon. Hexagon, heptagon, octagon, nonagon, or decagon. So, what shape are the buildings? Not the entire shape, just there's 3 separate, you know what I mean. Right, question number 3. It's a welcome return of the true or false round. True or false, the events of Resident Evil Infinite Darkness take place after Lost in Nightmares. Is that true or is that false? Question number 4. Rather excitedly, we spoke about this file earlier on today in our discussions. Other than Yoko, can you name anyone else on that special patient testing list that John mentioned earlier on? Now, this is quite difficult because a lot of the names are not complete. So there is room for some amusing answers. From the blanks, you can work out what their names are. But yeah, other than Yoko, can you name any other patient on that list? Question number 5. Right, a new type of question for you to enjoy. What could possibly go wrong? This question is dedicated to Resident Evil 0. This round is called Making Zero Sense in honor of Sonny Bauer, who came up with that name. And what we're going to be doing here is you guys are going to be explaining to the best of your abilities a particular scenario, and I will judge who has explained it better to me. Okay? So you may want to get out your notepad. So, can you explain to me why the magic elevator cannot work in Resident Evil 0? So, this question is a skill of your knowledge, of your lore understanding, your articulation, and your spelling and grammar. No, not really. But of your ability to, to formulate why the magic elevator cannot work. Join us after this when we'll see those answers.
That's not a quiz question, Nick.
I know it's not. That's why it's a different question.
That's why I don't like it.
That's why
a quiz. But it's because this is a quiz, Nick. It's Neptune's Biohazard quiz, not Neptune's Biohazard sit down and explain scenarios to me that don't work.
Which ironically is what the quiz is.
I feel like I'm on an exam.
Yeah, I really, really don't like this.
We'll see how it goes. Anyway, question number 1 then. What logo is on the examination room key? Rombie, we'll start with you.
I have no idea. Being it's an Umbrella Lab, an Umbrella logo would make sense. I have no idea.
You gonna go with Umbrella logo?
Yeah, I'll go with Umbrella logo.
Stars Tyrant?
I honestly didn't know, so I'm going to guess the Biohazard logo.
Batman?
I honestly didn't know either, so I'm going to guess the Umbrella logo as well.
It is the Umbrella logo. It is.
That was right there, wasn't it?
Points to Batman and Rombie there. Congratulations. Good start. Good start. Question number 2. What shape are the main areas of the Umbrella commercial headquarters? You had a choice of the hexagon, heptagon, octagon, nonagon, or decagon. How well do you remember shapes? I mean, we're really lowering the tone now, I feel, but we're going to have a go. Batman, what shape is the building?
Does it replicate the Umbrella logo? Is it octagonal?
I don't know. Is that what you're going with?
Or is it hexagon? Is it 6 sides? Yeah. No, I'm going to go for octagonal.
Okay, Rombie.
Octagon.
Stars Tyrant.
Octagon.
Points all round. Yes, correct. It is octagon. Well done. Question number 3 was a true or false question. The events of Resident Evil Infinite Darkness take place after Lost in Nightmares. Is that true or is that false? Batman.
False.
Stars Tyrant.
False.
Rombie.
False.
Correct. Yes, it is false. Well done. I thought I might slip you up there. Well done. Infinite Darkness is quietly being forgotten about by a lot of people, so it can be quite hard to date some of these events.
You mean to tell me that the critically acclaimed graphic novel didn't revitalise interest?
It did not. It has not. No.
Oh.
No. Question number 4. Other than Yoko, can you name any other person on the patient testing list? Stars Tyrant.
No.
I mean, it's something you've got to know. But
yeah, I obviously didn't pick this file up because I was Alyssa, so I will just say Derek Wesker.
Derek, it's such a good answer. Such a good answer. Rombie?
I have no idea. Again.
Batman?
I did pick this file up, but I honestly don't know. Paul Smith. I don't know.
No, there is not. No points there. Derek Wesker was not correct. You could have had Brian Reynolds, I assume. For example, Brian Reynolds, it says BRIA star, and then Reynolds, REYNO star S. Nathan Krabby, or Crab, maybe. Michael Sip something. Eric Strawberry, maybe. There's Yoko's on there.
Eric Strawberry.
Close. It's Eric. It's S star RAW, so it's definitely straw. And then there's 3 stars afterwards, but I'm going. I think that might be a homage to Daryl Strawberry.
Is Martin Sandwich on there?
Martin Sandwich? No, but he should have been, shouldn't he? No. I think Jason Ruddy, maybe another one. Wayne Crispy? No, Wayne. Chris.
Is there a character called Valerie on there? Because if there was, that is amazing hindsight for Resistance.
There is not. No, it's Richard Folk. You go Richard Folk.
Because Valerie is one of Yoko's friends, isn't she?
Christy Derringer and Ralph Speck were other answers there you could have had.
Ralph Speck. That's a good
Ralph Speck. It is, isn't it? Finally, question number 5. Explain it to me. Ironically, this has been discussed recently, and I'd done the question beforehand, so it should be fresh in a few people's minds about the magic elevator. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Go on, Batman. In your best English, why does the magic elevator not work in Resident Evil 0?
Well, to put it simply, the very top floor of the magic elevator takes you out onto the basement of the training facility, when really the top floor, if it's a real elevator, should place the training facility in the clouds in the sky above the marshalling yard. So therefore it's impossible for it to work.
Okay. Rombie?
Well, basically, the facility's on a cliff as well, so either way it doesn't work. So what John said, but with the other way around, it's on a cliff and then it goes down and it's in the outskirts of the forest, but then all of a sudden it's like where the facility would be, which is supposedly somewhere else and closer to the city, but not directly in the city, depending on which way you look at it, and that's also confusing, and it's because they constantly changed the development of the game and added the lab at the last minute. So it doesn't make any fucking sense.
I appreciated the profanity and the addition of the development. Stars Tyrant, can you improve upon these explanations?
To add to John, yes. Magic elevators, 4 floors. The top floor is the training facility, the basement of the training facility where the train crashes. Okay, so that's the highest, if you like. If you're looking at it in a vertical shaft, as an elevator works, because we're not talking about fucking diagonal elevators or horizontal elevators or elevators that literally fly through the sky like the fucking TARDIS. We're talking about a vertical shaft, okay? So that means, number 1, the top floor of the magic elevator is the training facility basement, which means that's high, okay? It's really, really, really high. The second floor is a level beneath the marshalling yard, just beneath the marshalling yard. When you see external images, you know, the camera angles and stuff that show you the marshalling yard, they show you the area around it, the wilderness around these train sheds. There is not a fucking great elevator shaft that launches into the sky. You know, if you look at the ground level above where the second floor of the marshalling yard is, there is no elevator shaft above it that shoots into the fucking sky. This is a ridiculous question, Nick. What is this? There is no visible evidence to show how the magic elevator can work. It can work if you just take floors 2, 3, and 4 into consideration, or B2, 3, and 4, or however it works. But it's the top floor that can't work. If you remove the training facility exit, that magic elevator is absolutely fine. It's just the training facility aspect of it that ruins it.
Thank you.
How do I even submit a final answer?
That's it. Well, I just judged, and I'm going to give the points to Stars Tyrant for his embattled passion of the anger and resentment that it causes.
I've even drawn diagrams which show like where the elevator shaft should be, and it doesn't exist.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone's correct. I enjoyed Stars Tyrant's explanation further, so he gets the points. So let's have a look at those final scores. And would you believe it? What a start! What a start to the first quiz. Everyone finishes on 3 points. Everyone's a winner. That's the truth. How wonderful! How wonderful! That's the end of the quiz. Join us next time where we'll have some more questions. Well, we are rapidly now coming towards the end of episode 101, and I'll look back at file 2. Up next, well, we're not sure. We can give a little quick preview going forward as to what we're going to be covering in this new season of the Resident Evil podcast. It is 20 years as well of Resident Evil 4, and I've alluded to earlier that we will be looking back on Resident Evil 4, the original, replaying that from beginning to end. We're going to have to zip through that because it's a long game. It's probably one of the first really long Resident Evil games. Thankfully, we've got many, many options as to how we're going to replay Resident Evil 4. There's lots of different versions out, HD ports, mobile versions. No one's going to be playing that. The Wii version, the original GameCube, all sorts, PS2, blah, blah, blah. You know, we're going to be going through that at some point. So that's a future podcast to look forward to. We hope Resident Evil 9 is going to be announced anytime soon, and we may touch back on Degeneration. I wouldn't mind looking back on Degeneration. We've also got 10-year retrospective Resident Evil Revelations 2. Back when we covered that a decade ago, that was quite an interesting way of doing it. We did it kind of episodically as they dropped.
It was very interesting, Nick, because we had to step in as hosts at one point because you weren't doing the episodic nature of it.
No, I was waiting for the disc release.
That was fun, though, playing each episode without knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah,
I think that entire podcast series we did contributes to why I love that game so much. And indeed, Resident Evil 7 gets rightfully praised for bringing the horror back to the series, but I would actually say that Revelations 2 did a lot of heavy lifting first. It set the series on a path that led to Resident Evil 7.
10 years on, where you can look back on Revelations 2, its lasting impact, as we like to do for our retrospective podcast. And we've had a few calls as well for another deep dive into one of our characters. Now, people may remember we did an Ada Wong special many, many moons ago, and people do seem to want a further one. So we may put a poll out at some point in the year to see who's a popular character to dissect further. But on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and for everyone joining as well. It is goodbye from me, Neptune.
Goodbye from me, Batman.
Goodbye from me, Stars Tyrant.
And goodbye from me, Rombie.
Before long, as they always do, people stopped talking about the catastrophe that struck down the once peaceful town of Raccoon City. Time, as they say, heals all. Yet, even so, we must never forget about the horrific events leading up to the catastrophe, or history will surely repeat itself. However, the harsh reality may be that mankind lacks the power to close the book on this disaster once and for all.